I retired unexpectedly at the age of 55 because Seneca College offered an extraordinarily good retirement package. And the deans told me later on that they expected that all the dead would retire, and that was why they were offering it. And what happened is most of their more experienced people retired and the dead would stay. So at 55, I was free to do all kinds of interesting things. And one of the things that, one of the first things I did was I was invited to be a visiting professor at UCLA and at Simmons. Now I know these opportunities don't happen to many people. Mostly it was because I was the token Canadian on many U.S. library committees, and so they knew my name. However, this teaching is a skill. It is a skill that some of us have and some of us don't. But if you have that skill, there are opportunities to teach that are out in the community. For instance, to give an example, I was paid for teaching a group of volunteers for a volunteer agency here in Toronto, and they had, it was an agency that had branches across Canada, but their library was in Toronto. And they sent books and whatnot to their various branches. The volunteers that they had knew nothing about libraries, and so they hired me to teach them how to catalog, the basic, simple parts of cataloging. And there are these opportunities around. Another thing that I did was consulting, and this sort of opportunity is available to anybody who knows a lot of it, but it doesn't have to. If you spend 30 or 40 years doing something, you ought to know a lot about it. And there are, here again, lots of consulting opportunities, big and small. One of the things I forgot to say about, I'll go back. For instance, there are a lot of people who want to have their private libraries cataloged. And I got several calls about doing this. I never did any of these jobs because it didn't suit my personal life or the kind of demands that people were making didn't suit me. And if somebody wanted it done in the next month, or they had certain strictures that they wanted, but they were willing to pay for these jobs. And so there are these kinds of jobs available. Now, you need to know something about the whole business of contracts, what all the clauses mean. Sometimes you have to meet with the lawyers of a library, a large library. And you need to know how to control the budget. It is not simply a matter of knowing a lot about your particular field. If you were fortunate, as I was, to have a husband who could support me, I didn't have to worry too much about how much money I was going to make. But if you don't have somebody else in the family who is bringing in money, then you have to be much more careful about the kind of agreements that you make and the kind of things that people will hold you responsible for. One of the biggest things in consulting is having the right personality and being able to understand what the employer is looking for. One example of what I mean is a library, a public library, that will remain nameless, where I was hired, and it became obvious to me after a while that the library, the head of the library wanted to get rid of the head of technical services. And because one of the very influential board members had a staff member in the cataloging department that they wanted to put as head of the cataloging department. And of course, the cataloging department head was perfectly adequate, was doing a good job, but they did not want me to say this. And they really didn't want improvements in the cataloging department. I was kind of therefore, which I didn't agree with, and I handed in a report that they did not like. But there are other big problems. I had another job place at this time, the university, hired me to solve the problem in the catalog department. And the union objected to my coming. It was a big union thing. And the problem turned out to be one particular staff member who was extremely difficult and unpleasant and was putting everybody on edge. And when I suggested that he would be glorious, because he was a very good cataloger, in the archives, which was in another building, that all the problems were solved. So frequently, what people tell you that they want to hire you for isn't really the reason. And so in a sense, you have to be somebody who can read the vibes, I guess you could say, that are being sent up in these situations. Other jobs I had was greatly improving the catalog department. Now all of them were as tricky personality problems. The third thing that I have done is a lot of writing. And I read textbooks. Here again, in some cases I am a total Canadian. I have many times been a total Canadian. A publisher who had my name wrote me once to ask me to send them recipes for typical Canadian dishes. I'm not a cook. But as I say, if you've been on enough other committees, people have their name. I have written, as I say, textbooks, and I also write a column for a U.S. journal. I get paid for the column, but I didn't start out being paid for either writing, either books or the column, but this grew through the years to the point where now I am very happy to be paid in U.S. dollars. I also have carved out a place that was not asked of me. I'm very interested in library history. And so therefore I elected myself as the unofficial historian for this particular journal. And so, for instance, I just finished a series of, I guess, 5 articles on the history of classification. This is not a peer-reviewed journal. I can write whatever I want. Sometimes I just write what interests me. For instance, this summer, my son and I went on a trip to the Atlantic provinces, all 4 of them, and we stayed in bed and breakfast. At each bed and breakfast, I asked people whether they read ebooks and what they thought about them. And I had an astounding number of responses, and then I sent an email to everybody I knew about everything about ebooks, and I have now written one article I found out about that, and I have another article that's ready to be written. So it is possible to find a writing career based on your own personality. What else do you need to find these jobs? One, you need to understand the rules of grammar. I have the Chicago manual style written in my brain because all publishers refer to the Chicago manual style. And again, the edition comes up, I rush down to the bookstore and buy myself a copy because I know that some publisher will say, aha, you didn't, this now has changed to a colon from a semicolon, or something like that. And the other thing that I do is I always get my copy in on time. And I think that those two factors, the fact that they can rely on the item arriving, and secondly, there's very little editing to do in my work. And I've had your publishers say this to me. I mean, it's delightful to get your work. I don't have to do a lot of editing or pay an editor to do it. So therefore, I'm cheaper for them. Also, there are books that any person who's working in libraries can write. You don't have to write textbooks like I write. Recently, a book called Hiring, Training, and Supervising Library Shelvers, a book that any of you could write, has published. And it was written by, in a very informal way, by a staff member in one of the libraries. And the book is terrific. I would send it a copy to write a review. And if I were still a training library technician, I would absolutely point out that this book was something that they all should have. And it is just based on experience. There's no fancy language in it. There's no deep library studies. There's nothing but just plain practical work by somebody, a library technician, as a matter of fact, who was supervised book shelvers for 20 years and knows all the angles. So there are subjects like that out there to be written. It never occurred to me, as I say, when I received this book, it never occurred to me to write such a thing. But what a good idea. So I think there's lots of opportunities out there. Shirley, at one time, had a business where she answered reference questions. That, people telephoned her and asked us questions, and she went around finding the answers and charged them money. Now, lots of businesses are going to pay this kind of money to get quick answers. Whether the internet has now killed that kind of business, I don't know. But I can tell you that my son, who is a computer person, can find things with great ease that I struggle for an hour before finding calling him to help me. And so there is a skill to navigating the internet.